Rise from your grave. Ultracore is a run-and-gun game released for the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive in 2019 and the PS4, Nintendo Switch and PS Vita in 2020. The game was originally developed by Digital Illusions, better known today as DICE. Yes, that's the same DICE behind Mirror's Edge and the Battlefield games. Apparently, Ultracore was previously known as Hardcore and was said to be 99% completed before being cancelled by its publisher Psygnosis, as they wanted to focus on the upcoming 32-bit generation instead. According to a few reports, the game was even demoed back in 2010, and DICE's co-founder, Fredrik
Liljegren,
thank you, has been trying to get this game released for at least a decade now. The issue with it being, Sony now owns all of Psygnosis' back catalog, and they did not seem very interested in releasing a cancelled Amiga and Sega Genesis game. Thankfully, the game was eventually released by Strictly Limited Games, a publisher which focuses on creating special editions for games which were only previously released digitally, which is how I got this game. Strictly Limited Games was kind enough to send me a copy, and I just had to review it. In fact, Strictly Limited Games actually includes some former staff from DICE, including Fredrik
Liljegren.
Thank you. Honestly, reading about this game's story is fascinating. The dude has been trying to get his game released for at least 10 years. I mean, that is a lot of dedication. I mean, can you imagine being this dude? Setting up meetings with Sony executives in 2010 and telling them you want to release a cancelled Sega Genesis game that they most likely didn't even know they owned. Now that is some serious labor of love. Now, with that said, there are some things about the official story that don't quite add up to me. For one thing, the game's planned 1994 release was cancelled because the publisher Psygnosis wanted to focus on the 32-bit generation instead. But if we look at their launch lineup, we can see that they also released Mickey Mania and Toy Story for the Sega Genesis in 1995 and 1996 respectively. Not to mention, they were quite active in 1994, launching 7 games for the Mega Drive in that year, including The Last Samurai 2 and The Misadventures of Link, which according to Sega Retro, launched in October and November of that year respectively. Now to be clear, I'm not stating the developers are lying, as we can also see that there were 6 other Mega Drive games in development for that year that Psygnosis cancelled, including Shadow of the Beast 3 and Rescue. If anything, this makes me think that perhaps it was Psygnosis who were not entirely honest. Maybe they had simply overreached themselves and launched too many games that did not meet their sales expectations. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but it is something I'm curious about. The game was said to be 99% completed, and now former DICE staff added the finishing touches using official Sega development kits, which again is pretty cool. Anyway, the game comes in a Mega Drive style box. I'm guessing they used the original art box they had planned for the game, because this definitely looks pretty vintage. And it's also a pretty decent cover. I mean, I'm not in love with it, but it's pretty good and does the job fine. On the back of the box though, I do feel it could have probably used a bit more text. It almost feels like they didn't know what they should put here. But that's a pretty minor complaint. Inside, we find an Ultracore postcard, which I quite like. It even has the main character's portrait on the stamp box, which is a pretty nice touch. We also get a European-style horizontal manual, printed on some really high-quality paper. It almost feels like photographic paper. The manual is a bit on the short side and somewhat sparse on information, but it's well made and pleasing to the eye. It's got a nice sense of aesthetic. The cartridge is also really nice. Putting it side by side with official carts, you'll be hard pressed to tell any differences between this and official Sega cartridges. That is, with the exception of the well-familiar notch on the side. But that's something that's been featured in just about every modern Mega Drive game. Even the plastic feels just like the real thing, with the only major difference being the back, which does not display any logo or warning text. But really, that's all pretty minor stuff. For all intents and purposes, this is a really high quality cartridge, on the level with games like Tanglewood and Xenocrisis. The back of the cartridge does feature normal screws though, meaning I can actually open this cart, which I know a lot of you often request. And I have no idea what I'm looking at here. So if you know what any of this is, do leave your thoughts on the comment section. Overall, this is a really nice packaging. I honestly have no major complaints here, and it does a really good job at emulating official Sega Mega Drive packaging, while modernizing some aesthetic components like the manual. Booting up the game, you're quickly brought to the main menu. There is no intro explaining the plot or characters, which makes sense. After all, most games from this era did not have any of that. But basically, you're a space soldier dude, and some guy is trying to take over the planet with a robot army, and you're there to stop him. Simple, but effective. You also gotta love the high score menu with the floating numbers. If there ever was a doubt this was a Euro-styled run-and-gun for the Amiga, this menu completely confirms all suspicions. Anyway, as mentioned, the game is a run-and-gun action platformer. Your objective is simply to reach the end of the level. But to do this, you're expected to dispatch enemies and platform through treacherous sections. But there's also quite a bit of keycard hunting, door finding, lever pulling, and just generally guessing where you need to go. But I'll get to that. The first thing you need to know is that there are two control schemes in this game. The first seems to be tailored towards keyboard and mouse controls or dual analog inputs, which actually works surprisingly better than I thought it would with a Mega Drive controller. Basically, you use the D-pad to move, and as long as you're holding down the fire button, the arrow keys will either let you aim where you want to, or slowly walk backwards while shooting. And the other control scheme is pretty much Contra. In general, I found both control schemes to work quite well, with the dual analog one giving you better aiming, which was generally more suited for bosses, while the Contra control scheme felt more tailored for platforming segments. I liked both control schemes, but every once in a while, my monkey brain would just default back to Contra, regardless of which control method I was using, so I just stuck with that one for the most part. Actually, there is one issue with the Contra control scheme. If you press A while shooting, you remain stationary, allowing you to change your aim without moving, something which Contra Hardcore also does. The issue is that you can only toggle between these settings if you're already shooting. If you're just standing, running, or jumping, pressing the A button does nothing. I know this seems minor, but in these sorts of games, you often need to take split-second decisions, and this extra step kept throwing me off. Anyway, Ultracore seems to have gotten a lot of its inspiration from the Turrican games, and it's incredibly addicting. In fact, if you told me this game was a Turrican spin-off, I would have believed you. You have a familiar control method, some of the weapons are similar, you can jump on enemies to damage them, but also to bounce off of them to reach higher platforms, and you even have the same style of oddly satisfying running animations. Yes, you know you're playing a Euro run-and-gun when even walking is satisfying. Now that is some buttery smooth animation. Although, I'm not really sure what's going on here. But then again, I do hear that it's a pelvic thrust that drives you insane. In fact, speaking of the graphics, they're a bit on the odd side. The outside segments look absolutely amazing, with some great use of parallax scrolling and interesting backgrounds. I especially like the level in this jungle moon with some nice subdued use of colors, making the backgrounds and parallax scrolling just barely visible, but clearly there. Simply put, These outside sections look amazing. And yet, the game chooses to spend 70% of the time closed indoors. Yes, you'll spend almost the entire game in either military bases or factories. And don't get me wrong, these areas don't look bad, but they're not as impressive, often having no parallax scrolling other than the two standard Sega Genesis background layers, and sometimes not even that. And while I quite like the blue, green, and gray tones the game generally goes for indoors, I'm not a big fan of when it decides to go all in on dithering shades of brown. It also doesn't help that the first few levels look exactly the same. It's not until we reach that jungle moon I told you about and its follow-up stage where we get some much needed visual variety. Anyway, like I said before, this is not a linear game. Most levels will have several branching paths that you'll have to explore to find keycards or doors for said keycards. Despite that, I never got lost in Ultracore. Yes, the levels are somewhat open, but not big enough that you'll start wandering around with no clue of where to go. Mostly because, once you enter a door that is used to progress through the level, you become locked out of the path where you came from. Meaning that each level is split into various smaller subsections. Now, while I think this is a good idea, as again, it prevents you from getting lost, it also has the side effect of you never knowing if the door you're going into is used to progress through the level or if it simply takes you to an area where you can pick up health, ammo, coins, or upgrades. As sometimes you have to choose between two or more doors, and you enter one hoping to find some power-ups, to then discover you picked the wrong door and are now forced to progress through the level while being locked out of the previous area. I feel like this issue could have been easily solved if there was something differentiating between door types, like maybe an outline of a different color or something to that effect. But despite that, I can't complain too much, as traversing through these levels is incredibly fun. Shooting hordes of robot enemies is just so satisfying, and the platforming feels right. This specific mix of platforming, shooting, and light exploration is very akin to what you'd find from European PC and Amiga developers. So, while yes, Ultracore is very much a product of its time, it's also really well made. But, with all of that said, there are a few flaws. The first issue I have is with some specific platforming segments. On level 2, you'll reach this area where you need to vertically climb a few platforms. And no joke, this might just be one of the hardest platforming sections of the game. Basically, when you land on a platform, it starts bouncing, so you need to jump on it and then jump again just as it reaches its peak bounce. The issue is, you're given absolutely no margin of error. You need to jump just as it reaches its peak, and then immediately commit to the other platform. Because of that, I've lost a ton of lives here. I've reached this spot with 5 or more lives, only to then lose them all here. But in fact, this is not the only place where the platforming gets insanely hard out of nowhere. You also have this factory stage where you're supposed to, again, climb upwards. But you're not given any forewarning of what the layout of the stage is. And even if you already know its layout, you need to be pixel perfect in your jumps and timing to make it out alive. It's like the developers realized that their game is a bit on the easy side and then decided to insert some really unfair platforming segments. Now thankfully, when you die, you start out immediately where you left off, and the game is also very generous with extra lives, ammo, and upgrades. You'll find plenty of these throughout your regular play, but you'll also find walls, floors, and ceilings that you can shoot down for more gear, as well as invisible walls that are revealed when you bump into them, and even secret areas that you can only reach by bouncing off of enemies. In fact, this game is absolutely riddled with secret rooms and areas, which heavily promotes and rewards player exploration, something which I really enjoyed. I mean, at one point I had over 20 lives stocked. But trust me, you'll need them. Because this game absolutely loves to kill you without any warning. Oh man, how was I supposed to know that? Oh come on, really? How was I supposed to know that was there? And you also have leaps of faith, where you don't know where the closest platform is, so you just have to assume it's there. As mentioned before, you also have several weapon pickups and their upgrades. Basically, you'll come across these boxes, which are used to unlock new weapons. The first two weapons I got, I kind of did not really see their point. All they did was shoot straight like my regular gun. Except now, they also consumed ammo. I mean, sure, yes. They caused more damage or had a higher refire rate. But they were also kind of useless if you ask me. You do however find a dual gun and of course my favorite, the spread gun, which was by far the most useful weapon. I also found a rocket launcher, which at first I just didn't care for it, as it was another forward shooting gun. That is, until I discovered how it completely demolishes any boss it comes across, especially after being upgraded. Oh, right, I haven't talked about the upgrades yet. Basically, you'll also come across these items, and when you pick them up, it will either upgrade the weapon you're using, or if it's already fully upgraded, it will then upgrade your next weapon in your inventory. Each weapon can only be upgraded twice, and all these improvements do is increase the damage output. But man, if you go around looking for secret areas, by the second half of the game, you've basically turned into a weapon of mass destruction. And it feels so great. Now, all of your weapons are saved in your inventory once you pick them up, and you can toggle between them with a push of a button. The issue is, it can take quite a while to get to the weapon you want. I would sometimes get damaged because I was looking for the spread gun or the rocket launcher, but I had to cycle between the others to get there. It also does not help that every weapon, besides their starting one, uses ammo. And believe me, they'll burn through your ammo really fast. So I often just used my starting weapon and only changed it when the situation called for it, namely hard to reach angles or bosses. Speaking of which, the bosses are actually quite easy, especially if you have the control scheme that allows for better aiming. Heck, some of these bosses are absolute pushovers with this control scheme. But even if you use the Contra-style controls, they're all still fairly easy. Although it is weird how your character and regular enemies have so many frames of animation, but the bosses barely have any. I also wish the cutscenes were animated. Basically, as you progress through the levels, you'll occasionally find people to talk to or important items to pick up, which help fill in the plot or tell you where you need to go to progress. Cutscenes will also trigger when you clear some levels. But again, it's just an image with a text overlay, which is a shame because some of these images look stunning in that European Amiga style. Throughout the levels, you'll often run across terminals as well. These can be used to unlock doors or disarm traps provided you have the right keycard. You can also see a map of a small section of the level or in some cases contact a store. Here, you can trade coins for ammo, screen clearing bombs, or health and lives. My advice is, go for the latter. You'll need every life you can get for those tricky platforming segments. I will say though, it's kind of weird how this soldier you meet seems to be anime inspired, but the store owner looks more like a character from a western indie comic book. Different artists maybe? And finally, you have the music. And my god, the developers really knew how to maximize the Mega Drive sound hardware. I'm not even sure what to call this soundtrack. Techno? Synthwave maybe? Whatever it is, it sounds great and definitely has that European Amiga feel. Overall, Ultracore is an awesome game. It's a distinctively 90s Euro run-and-gun that is a great reminder of just how good this genre can be when properly handled. The graphics range from pleasing to greatly aesthetic, the music is amazing, the platforming is solid, But most of all, the shooting is just so satisfying. Sadly, the game is currently sold out at the strictly limited game store, but you can still get it from the PSN and Nintendo Switch online stores, as well as eBay. But if you go for the latter, do be aware that the PAL Mega Drive version will only run on PAL systems, while the US versions will only work on Sega Genesis models. But regardless of which version you get, Ultracore is an absolutely amazing title. Don't get me wrong, the game is clearly a product of its time. But man, what a product! And while we lost out for not having this game available back in 1994, I can safely say it was worth the wait. Hey everyone, thank you for watching St1ka's Retro Corner. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And you can also support me on Patreon. It may not seem like it, but even $1 is a really big help in keeping this channel going. I'd also like to thank my newest Patreon supporters, Asatir, Mike Morfett, and Tiago Pereira dos Santos Silva. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!